Seek first to understand, then to be understood. This is a quote from the book Seven Habits of Highly Effective People, written by Stephen Covey, and it's one of the seven habits of highly effective people. And the book is an all-time classic. I'll admit, when I first started to read it, early on in the book, I was like, what's the big deal about this? I wasn't really impressed. And then chapter after chapter started to kind of blow my mind and really gave me a lot of really important epiphanies. And I think a lot of people think this is a book about business and industry, and it kind of is. It definitely talks a lot about corporate life and how to manage and stuff, but it's really just these seven habits are useful for any individual dealing with human interactions, and it opens up your mind to seeing and experiencing the world in a different way. And this is one of my favorite quotes and one of my favorite habits from the list. Seek first to understand, then to be understood. And it's really just all about listening to the other person. These days, and really just human nature is, we're really good at talking, getting our point across, especially if, say, you're in a disagreement or a debate, whether, God forbid, on Facebook, which is the worst place you could do that, or in person. Our priority is always just to get our point of view, how we feel, across to the other person. And really all we're trying to do is to be understood, but we're trying to be understood first. The point of this message, seek first to understand, then to be understood, is take a moment, listen to the other person. Again, it's better if it's in person, even if you're doing this online, Twitter, Facebook, whatever. Instead of being in such a hurry to tell the other person why they're wrong or why you're right, ask that person, why do you believe that way? Even if, and especially if actually this is something you strongly disagree with. It could be a hot button topic like abortion versus, right to life, Democrat versus Republican. Like, we'll pick the topic. The more heated, the more important it is to really try to understand where this other person is coming from. Because I know, I can speak from personal experience, when I feel strongly about something and somebody has an opposing point of view, I'm so sure that I'm right and they're wrong. I just want to my instinct is to point out all the ways that they're wrong, try to intellectually beat them down. But what I've learned, once you start to ask them, like, well, why do you feel this way? Why is this your point of view? One, you start to actually relate to them, and that's an important part when it comes to human interaction, is you want to have some compassion for that individual. Even if they believe something that you're so vehemently opposed to, you want to remember that that's another person, and they have just as strong a feeling about that subject as you do with your opposing view. But what, this magical thing happens too when you start to ask somebody first and you listen to them and you try to learn why they feel that way, is you maybe start to understand, like, oh, I haven't thought about the subject in that way before. Even if you still feel strongly about that, you may have a little bit more understanding of, a broader picture of the subject, and you may understand why this person feels so strong. Maybe they had a personal experience and that really changed their life in a certain way. And again, you start to relate to them on a human level versus just me versus them. And it really is a powerful way of trying to understand the human behind that point of view. And again, it's almost impossible to do that on social media. And I'll be honest, when I see people get in disagreements on social media, I like to grab my imaginary popcorn and sit back and read the comments as they kind of go back and forth, because it is kind of entertaining in a sick way. But I never partake in these discussions because, one, I know it's almost impossible to remember you're talking to a human when you're really just reading text. Plus, you can't have that back and forth. It's really weird to say, oh, why do you feel that way? Because then you feel like you've lost the argument. Somehow you've lost points. So even if you don't do this, I think it's an important thing to remember that whenever you're in a disagreement or you're having an interaction with somebody, and what's the number one problem in relationships? Communication. Everybody says that. It's because we think in our head we understand where that person's coming from. We've already made up our assumptions. They feel this way because of this. And again, from personal experience, I've always found that I'm pretty much always wrong when I make that assumption about why the other person feels that way. So taking a minute and just asking the person why, what's behind this feeling, what's behind this emotion, can have a powerfully drastic change in understanding and connection. And this video is going on pretty long, but I feel pretty strong about the subject, so I'm going to keep going. There's actually a story from the book that Stephen Covey says, and in the book, this is a story to back up what he calls having a paradigm shift. So it's not necessarily related to this habit, but I think it kind of does. And I'll see if I can retell it without butchering it. But basically, he's sitting on a bus, and this man with his 4 kids comes on, and the kids are acting crazy. They're screaming at each other. They're throwing things, and the man's just sitting there with his head down, pretty much oblivious to what these kids are doing. And so Stephen Covey is sitting next to this guy. All the other passengers on the bus are irritated, like, why is this guy ignoring their kids? You know, the kids are causing hell. Obviously, this guy is like a selfish asshole. So Stephen Covey taps the guy on the shoulder, and he's like, excuse me, sir, don't you realize that your kids are acting up and they're causing a scene? And he said he looks up, shakes his head almost like he didn't even realize where he was. And he said, oh, I'm very sorry. We just came back from the hospital where their mother died an hour ago, and I'm still processing it, and I guess they don't know how to react. Stephen Covey's like, whoa, that's a paradigm shift, because I thought this was just a selfish asshole that didn't care his kids were irritating the whole bus, but he was obviously going through something very heavy. So I always think about that. You know, my big thing is road rage. I got bad road rage. So when I'm in a car, somebody cuts me off, they do something stupid, I'm like, oh, this asshole, they're doing it to me specifically. But then I'm like, well, maybe this person's really in a hurry to get home because they just got a panicked message from their spouse or something. I don't know, the scenarios are endless, but I try to remember, like, okay, there's a lot of reasons why somebody could be acting this way, and I can't assume they're a bad person because they're doing this. So that's just something I think is powerful. I wish everybody would kind of realize that we really would do much better if we ask the other person and try to hear them and listen and try to understand before speaking our point of view. So give it a shot. Again, better in person. If you have to, try to do it on social media and see if it doesn't blow up in your face. But that's it. Take care, y'all.